Hey there, this is Dane from featherprep.com. Thanks for joining me here today. In my last couple of videos, I've dealt with some Roman Catholic themes and have done my best to provide a Protestant response to a number of what I think are some pretty important topics. Now, in today's video, I want to discuss the Roman Catholic view of the Eucharist, or communion, as many Protestants might call it. Now, like my previous Catholic-related videos, this one again comes courtesy of YouTube. Their algorithms suggest which videos that I may like, and so probably because of my most recent viewing history, they suggested a video called Eucharist, the Faith in 4 Minutes, from a channel called The Joy of the Faith. This is a Roman Catholic channel, and the young gentleman on the channel does a pretty good job of explaining the Roman Catholic view of the Eucharist in simple terms. He's a very engaging young man, and I enjoyed watching him. Now, if you don't already know, Roman Catholics believe something very different from most Protestants when it comes to the Eucharist, or communion. They hold that the bread and cup do not merely represent the body and blood of Jesus, as many Protestants might believe. Rather, they believe that these elements actually and literally become the flesh and blood of Jesus. Literally. Okay, so let's start with a short clip that sort of sets the stage for this argument.
What is the Eucharist? We believe it's the body and blood of Jesus. What was once bread and wine have become his body and blood. And this sounds pretty crazy. Why would we believe that? Well, because Jesus said so. In the upper room, he said, "This is my body." And we believe that when Jesus, who is God, speaks, things happen.
Okay, so when Jesus said, "This is my body," Roman Catholics believe that he meant that literally. I've heard Catholics say that is means is. If Jesus said, "This is my body," then he didn't mean "this represents my body." If Jesus wanted to think that the bread only represented his body, then he would have said, "This represents my body." The problem with this argument is that it's simply not true. The word is can mean represent, and I can very easily demonstrate this. If I were to show you a map and say, this is Route 1, I don't mean that the line on this paper or my phone or my computer is the actual road. Rather, when I say that this is Route 1, I mean that this line represents a real road. But the line on the map is not what you will be driving on, it only represents it. Likewise, if I were to show you a photograph and say, these are my grandparents, I don't mean that my grandparents are two-dimensional images on a photograph made up of pixels. Rather, what I mean is that the individuals in this photograph represent my grandparents, who would be real people. The word is can clearly mean represents depending on how it's used. But you may say, maybe the Bible uses the word differently. Maybe when the Bible uses the word is, it means it literally. Well, let me show you that that's not the case. You may remember that in 2 Samuel, King David was in a war with the Philistines, and he wished that he could just have a drink from the water from the well in Bethlehem. Well, 3 of his soldiers took that to heart. They broke through the Philistine line, got the water, and brought it back to David. But he refused to drink it because the men had jeopardized their lives for it. He poured the water out and said, "Is this not the blood of the men who went in?" Note that he used the word is. In essence, he said of the water, "This is the blood," as he poured it out on the ground. But there's no reason to think that the water had become blood or that David thought that the water had become blood. Rather, when he said that this is the blood, he most certainly knew that it was still water. But he was using the word is to mean represents. This represents the blood of his men. Now, someone is going to argue, just like in the video clip that one we just saw, that when Jesus says is, he means is and not represents. Well, first, there's no rule anywhere that tells us that that is true. And second, I can easily demonstrate that that simply isn't true. In Mark chapter 3, when Jesus' mother and brothers had come to see him, Jesus looks around at the crowd and asks, "Who is my mother or my brothers?" And then he answers his own question. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and my sister and mother. Note that Jesus used the word is here. Whoever does the will of God is his mother, Mary. Therefore, if the rule is true that when Jesus uses the word is, that he always means it literally, then if I do the will of God, it must necessarily follow that I am the Blessed Virgin Mary, Mother of God. That's ridiculous. We can't assume something is true because we want it to be true. We have to demonstrate that it is true on its own merits. So when Jesus said, "This is my body," we can see that he either meant it was literally his body or he meant that it represented his body. Both have equal footing here as we just look at the passage. There's no hermeneutical principle that would dictate a certain outcome. All right, let's go back to the video and listen in as we are told how we know that Jesus could not have been speaking symbolically.
So it's pretty clear there he was not speaking symbolically. But let's go into the Greek real quick. The original language of the Gospels was Greek, and I know everyone loves Greek, so we're going to make this super short. And we're just going to look at one verse, John 6:58. "This is the bread that came down from heaven, unlike your ancestors who ate and still died. Whoever eats this bread will live forever." Reading this in English doesn't reveal much, but when we go into the Greek, it's going to blow your mind. Jesus talks about ancestors who ate, and the word that he uses there is a phagon, and the root word of that is phago, which is just the normal word to eat. But Jesus doesn't use that same word. He uses trogon, which means to gnaw. And it's amazing, this word is only used 6 times in the whole New Testament, 4 of which are in John 6, compared to phago, which is used 93 times in the New Testament. So why does he use this different word to eat? Because we're eating something different. We're eating his flesh. So I hope that you can see from the Greek that Jesus meant this was literal, that this was his flesh that we were eating, a different kind of eating, not just normal eating, like the ancestors who died. He who eats this bread will live forever.
Okay, so here we are focused on only one verse, John 6:58, and a Greek word found in the passage trogon. We are told that the word is a different word for the normal word to eat. It means to gnaw, and that it's found only 6 times in the New Testament. The question was asked, why does Jesus use this different word to eat? And the answer is given us, because we're eating something different. We're eating his flesh. While it is true that the word is found 4 times in this one chapter, it also has 2 occurrences outside of the chapter. And in those instances, we can clearly see that it does not have anything to do with the Eucharist and that it's not about eating something different than food. In Matthew 24, verse 38, Jesus uses the word trogon when he says, "As in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark." There, the word eating is the Greek word trogon. However, its use in the verse suggests ordinary eating. Prior to the flood, the people were doing what they were always doing, and that just is simply eating. There's nothing special about its use there, or at least nothing that would lead us to believe that Jesus has the Eucharist in mind as he spoke that. The final occurrence in the New Testament is in John 13:18, where Jesus shares with his disciples that he's going to be betrayed by someone very close, by someone who had eaten bread with him. Of course, he is referring to Judas, and we can know for absolute certain that Jesus is not talking about the Eucharist, and he's not talking about eating his flesh, since Judas did not participate in that. So the argument that the Greek word trogon has to mean something other than normal food just doesn't hold water. It's not necessarily true that the use of the word dictates that the wafer and cup literally become the body and blood of Jesus. The only way anyone is going to reach that conclusion is if they begin with the assumption that it's already true. But that's not good biblical exegesis. But the question still remains, do the bread and cup literally become the body and blood of Jesus during the Eucharist, or is there another way of understanding it? And I think that there is. Back in Luke 22, where Jesus was instituting the Lord's Supper, right after he introduces the bread in verse 19, we read him saying, "Likewise, he also took the cup after supper, saying, 'This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is shed for you.'" Note that he said his blood is shed for you, not will be shed for you. Clearly, the word "is" here is not literal because he was not at the moment bleeding. He would be very soon, but not at that moment. Therefore, I think this gives us our best clue in understanding the passage. Jesus is using the word "is" in verse 20 in a non-literal way, and that may just tip the scales in understanding that he is likely using the word "is" in verse 19 in a non-literal way. I think the evidence we have indicates that Jesus was saying this bread represents his body and this cup represents his blood. Well, there's a lot more I could say on this subject, but I'm just going to sort of leave it at that. If you like this video and you want to see more of them, then be sure to hit the thumbs up button, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and I look forward to seeing you next time here.